Good morning. Today a special report on the end of an era, the era of an institution, which, as far as the public was concerned, was for many years the silent home for those who'd committed serious offences under the Criminal Code of Canada. For more than 100 years, this grim establishment has dominated not only the city of New Westminster, but the treatment of all hard-time convicts in British Columbia. From modest beginnings in 1878, it developed into the classic North American penitentiary. Massive dome, regimented cells, huge windlasses for opening a tier at a time, untouched by human hand, you might say. A tough, hard place to serve your time. And I'll not forget a night in '63 when I was involved in the first major post-war riot. And I'll tell you some of that story today. But it wasn't the last of the riots. There was 3 big ones in the '70s. The whole of Canada watched during the '76 riot, when, led by a convict, now himself dead at the hands of another convict in another prison, the army had to be called just to be on the safe side. And the prisoners who freed themselves in the East Bloc, which had looked as if you couldn't wreck it with dynamite, tore the whole place apart. Cells were wrecked, equipment was destroyed, fires were set, fires were put out, the gymnasium was a shambles, and it all led to the incredible spectacle of convicts holding televised press conferences as negotiations went on for the release of their particular hostages. A happy ending of a kind, you might say. But the most tragic event in the history of BC Penn was in '75. Again, a hostage-taking, this time in this building, the classification office. Long, drawn-out, fearful negotiations. More trouble, more damage. And when it was over, the woman, Mary Steinhauser, had been shot and killed in the efforts to free the hostages. A sad, sad affair. But the troubles weren't over yet. We're looking down now on the area where the visitors came to see the inmates. And again, convicts got hold of a gun. A guard barely escaped with his life. And where, as usual, the devastation for a prison riot was routine. Shots had been fired in this one. Nobody was hit. The convicts finally surrendered after this, the longest hostage-taking incident in the BC Penn's history. And Andy Bruce and company walked out into formal custody. None of this can ever happen again. The BC Penn is closing. No tears will be shed by those who served time there. It was April the 19th, 1963, when I was called in as a mediator in a hostage-taking of a guard called Pat Dennis. I'll never forget that night. This is the second time in my life, and it'll probably be the last time, that I will have been standing in the main dome of the British Columbia Penitentiary. And I came back today for a particular purpose. You couldn't exactly call it nostalgia. You couldn't exactly call it fun to come back. But BC Penitentiary means a lot of things to a lot of people. It's a storehouse of drama, a storehouse of tragedy, a storehouse of misery, and there have been quite a few stories with happy endings. It was one night in April 1963. I was sitting at home with my family, and I got a phone call from Tommy Hall. Strangest phone call I ever had in my life. Tommy, who was the warden at the BC Penn, said, and we weren't on very good terms at the time because I'd been nagging about the BC Penn on the radio. He said, "Jack, we got a problem. few prisoners causing some trouble. And he said they want to speak either to Lester Pearson, who was the Prime Minister of Canada at the time, or Jack Webster. So, of course, being as stupid as I look, I said, well, if Lester Pearson can't come, I'll come. So I came over to the BC Pen. And that was, it was a fairly bad riot. But what I'll always remember about that particular night in this particular place, apart from some difficulties downstairs that we'll tell you about in a little while, in this main hall, there were, by my count, journalistic exaggeration no doubt, between 300 and 400 prisoners who hadn't gone back to their cells, most of them drug addicts. And they wanted me to do one thing. They wanted me to arrange a public meeting in a downtown hall at which I would be present and the Minister of Justice would be present and everybody else in the country would be present to arrange for the legalization of heroin. And before I could even get down to do what was the job I had to do to help a guard downstairs who was being held hostage by 3 prisoners, I had to stop in this hall, turn on my tape recorder, and interview, 2 or 3 drug addicts, campaigning then, as some of them campaign now, a different generation, for the legalization of heroin. That night ended, by and large, comparatively well. It was a bad enough riot. It wasn't as bad as some of the things that happened later in the history of BC Penitentiary. But that was the first time I'd been in a place like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels. An incredible place. Served its purpose at the time, I suppose. But never since have I been asked again in the middle of a prison riot to arrange a public meeting for the legalization of heroin. And as I look around this place today, I see a couple of familiar faces. And I'm going to talk to a couple of these familiar faces. Back in the BC Pen after all these years. I'm telling you, after April '63, you couldn't get me in here if you'd given me a gold pass. Ian Bartholomew.
Nice to meet you, Jack.
Nice to meet you. Al Russell.
Nice to see you again, John.
Nice to meet you again. We'll talk about the again in a minute. How long have you been around here, Ian?
17 years.
What does it feel like now with the place virtually empty?
Well, it gives you an eerie feeling, all right, when you come on duty, Everything seems to be dead.
In your 17 years, what was the biggest population you had?
If my memory's correct, 759.
And you didn't have cells for 759, did you?
Well, we had 28 in each hut. We had 4 huts down there with 28 inmates in each hut. And we had inmates up in the upper floor in the school. They were lying on
You used to sleep in the schoolroom, didn't you?
That's right.
And nowadays, how many have you got in a place?
We have 75.
75. It's a funny, eerie feeling.
Yeah, it does. There's no two ways
By
about
and
that.
large, has it been a rough, tough, miserable job, or has it had its moments of,
Well, I think it's just like any other job. Sometimes you get fed up and, you get disgusted with everything, and other days it's all right.
not too bad?
No, not at all.
I remember one day, Al, when, I don't know about you, but I was scared witless.
Jock, that night I seen you, you were scared more than witless. You were, how about a real flat white?
Was I entitled to be scared?
You were entitled to be scared.
Were you in the main hall when I came in that
I was
night?
in the main hall when you came in.
I said between 300 and 400 people milling around, and am I
Yes,
right?
I would say there was at least 300 to 400 milling around.
And they wanted what?
They wanted to see you badly. They wanted, different things. Numeral to mention.
It was. They wanted everything, but
Everything.
the kitchen sink at
Everything
that
but the
particular,
kitchen sink.
particular time. That was, I came, do you remember what time, were you called in at the time, or did you come in
Yes,
later?
I was at my sister-in-law's that night for dinner, and I was called in from there. And I guess I got here about, around 10 o'clock.
I got here about midnight around that time. Then I chatted with Tommy Hall, and then I came through here to go downstairs. Can you point to how I went down?
Yes, she went down across the dome here and down this auditorium door.
And down that,
Right across the door down there.
carrying my little tape recorder.
Carrying your tape recorder.
And then I came back up a number of times.
Yes, you did. You came back up the main hall.
Still looking pretty
Still
white-faced.
looking pretty white.
Time, I'll tell you. Where were you when they started firing the gas shells?
I
was
out-
down there.
Yeah, I know you were down there, and the shells were going right over your building. But I was out on the roadway at the time.
Yeah. And then the army arrived later,
The Army arrived later on in the morning.
and the Mounties
The
arrived.
Mounties were here earlier in the evening.
But that, by and large, how was it they had tried to escape? There were three.
Yes, there was three had hid between the east wing block and the auditorium. And when they thought everything was clear, they come up over the roof of the auditorium. They got onto the roadway in front of the main hall. They had fire bombs hid under the main hall steps. And at this time, our patrol yard officer came along with a guard dog and surprised them.
That's right, and the dog beat them back, but they captured Pat Dennis, his name was.
Made their way back into the auditorium and took Pat Dennis hostage.
Yeah, well, that was about midnight I got here, and I think we were finished and we had them all transported under the various promises by about noon the next
It
day.
was about noon the next day.
Well, now, that was 1963, and you've been around a long while. You must be
I've
much
been
in
here
service.
since I got 25 years just about in.
25 years just about in. Oh, well. Happy retirement ahead of you, no doubt.
I hope so, if things work out the way I hope they do.
The way it should.
Yes.
What's your best or your worst memory of the BC Pen, Al? It's Al Russell.
Well, it's like Ian said, we have some good memories, a lot of good memories, a lot of good fellows we worked with, some bad memories, different escapades we've been mixed up with. But they're not all bad memories.
Not all bad memories. Do you ever bump into guys who have served their time?
Oh, yes, I've bumped inmates in the street all over BC. And they say, "Hi, boss, how's things in the joint?" That's it.
And you say, haven't changed a
They haven't
bit.
changed a bit.
This place hasn't really changed that much, has
Not
it, since
that much.
'63?
No, not that much. Been a few improvements made, but that's about all.
Well, I'm glad that I was always only in here as an invited guest and never as one of your compulsory guests. I wish you the very best to
Thanks
pair
very
of you
much.
with all the other guys that served in the BC Penitentiary as guards and officials. More guts than a cartload of monkeys. I've just come down from the main hall where you saw me, and now I'm in the gymnasium right down at the foot of the penitentiary to give you the end of the story that I was telling about in the riot. Yeah, it's still here, empty, in April 1963. But you know, it's it's more than 17 years since I stood here that night in April. And I looked into this washroom, when I came down to do my negotiator bit. Here's a guard with a wire around his neck and these three fellas with a knife at his throat, making all kinds of incredible demands. I won't give you the details, but I was quite cool to begin with. I was going back up and downstairs with my little tape recorder, doing reports on the radio to ensure that the rebellious prisoners knew their troubles were being told to the outside world. Then all of a sudden something went wrong. Gas shells were fired up in the main hall for reasons I won't go into. And suddenly this place is filled with gas. And suddenly I'm grabbed and the knife is at my throat. And I'm told, unless they stop firing these gas shells now, Webster, you're a goner too. There was a phone just along here, and I'm on the phone in 10 seconds saying, "Hey, Warden," it was Tommy Hall, "get that so-and-so gas gun firing stopped, or I'm going to be a casualty. I'm already a hostage." To cut a long story short, we did a lot of talking, a lot of negotiating, and a matter of 5 or 6 hours later, I made a deal with the prisoners and with the cooperation of the Attorney General, Bonner, and I'm sure he remembers that night. And we managed to get the prisoners transferred to other establishments across the country, and we all walked out, the guard and myself, free and relatively undamaged. I suppose that was the first kind of big post-war riot in the BC Pen. Jim looks just as good. In fact, it looks better. There's a new floor since I was here last, I think I can say. But I'm kind of glad the place is going. Just seems a pity to knock down all this solid buildings. For what, I don't know. But April 1963 was one night I won't forget in a long, long time. I'm sitting on the bed in 2H in Supermax. Used to call it Hall's penthouse when it was constructed after the '63 riot. And this was the legendary Andy Brucey's cell. And you can hardly say it compares to the Hyatt Regency or the Hotel Vancouver. Let me show you something. This is the door, closed, listen. That's how you got your food. Then that was closed again. I wouldn't like to spend more than 2 minutes at the maximum in here, I'll tell you. Now, if somebody will open this gate, I'll get out again. 2 minutes, I said. Thank you very much, Ian. Much obliged. Horrible place. Definitely horrible. How many cells altogether in Supermax as it was?
44.
What was the maximum population you ever had in here?
I think we had somewhere around 72 on one occasion following a riot.
That was after the big riot.
That's right.
The most recent big riot.
That's right.
Yeah, but look, this was built around '64, wasn't it?
That's correct.
And they are tiny cells.
Oh, they're not big.
Now, then a judge came down with a cruel and unusual punishment ruling. What did that do to the conditions in Supermax, if anything?
Yes, there were 3 significant changes. Firstly, we did some physical changes to the cells. We added a bunk, we changed the construction of the door, and we added tables and racks.
You mean you gave them a mattress, cut a window in the door, and added tables and racks?
No, they had the mattress. We gave them the bunk for the mattress.
Oh, it was a bunk on the concrete before.
Exactly.
So you built a little bed and added the tables and racks.
That's right.
What about exercising?
We constructed an area on the roof for that purpose. And the other item is really better bookkeeping, better records of control and what was done.
Yeah. Well, would these guys have access to television at all when they were in Supermax?
No, they did not have.
No television, no radio?
No. Radio, yes.
Radio?
No TV.
No television. And they'd be here for how long?
Well, it all depended on their behavior. The usual was 30 to 60 days.
I was on a punishment.
No, that might have been one of 3 reasons, punishment being one. Administrative purposes is another, if they're a bad bird and they had to have that kind of treatment. And the third is for their own protection.
You mean if they're afraid of being killed?
Yes, exactly.
Supposing, though, for instance, you got a nervous Nelly like me who's doing hard time in here, could I come to the warden and say, look, I want peace and quiet at any price. Can I go to Supermax?
That's right, we used to do it.
And you do that?
That's correct.
Sex offenders, too?
Yes, sex offenders, too.
Well, this will all be ripped down in due course.
That's true.
Will anybody be sorry to see them go?
I think a few.
Not those that were in them.
No.
But they were a good administrative vehicle for the real rough, tough guy.
It certainly was.
Yeah, because there was no way anybody could cause trouble once they're in here.
That was the idea of the place. It was designed to keep troublemakers in the place.
And it worked.
And it worked.
This is the area built on the roof of Supermax after the cruel and unusual punishment ruling by the judge. These are 3 glass cages, glass at the top, wire mesh at the bottom. So the dangerous prisoners or the protective custody boys could come up, mill around in these bare places, but they could see the sky, they could see the weather, they could breathe some direct fresh air. That's what you might call the playground for the Supermax prisoners. It fulfilled, I suppose, the orders of the judge who called solitary by itself cruel and unusual punishment. Now Brian, and that's Brian Coxford, of course, there, and the warden are going to take us back and have a look at some of the conditions in the old B7. Quite interesting, I think you'll find.
Herb, we're in the East Wing, top tier, cell 15, shades of the 1976 riot, I guess.
Right. A bike here that tells a story. The damage created here was led by a group of bikers.
And this bike still remains, yet all the other cells were punctured out.
That's right, it's a symbol. As we're walking through and you can see the damage, the symbol remains behind us.
You're suggesting that most of this damage was caused by a group of bikers then?
Well, yes, certainly led by it.
And of course, Herb, that riot of the day in '76, what did it last, about a week?
Yes, it did. It lasted almost full 7 days.
And this tier, or at least the east wing, all 5 tiers were virtually under siege, eh?
They were, and literally destroyed.
What was damage?
1.8 million.
And a decision was made in that day, I guess, to sort of, well, change around at least the present or the position of the pen in terms of its direction. What was done then?
The intent was to change the role and make it a regional reception center, and also used for housing the more difficult inmates in British Columbia.
And these tiers, as we see them now, were left. Just a couple of the tiers were refurbished.
That's correct, the bottom 2 tiers.
And as we well know it now, the direction's changed completely again, and this will be no more.
That's right, total closure.
Now we're looking from the exercise area for Supermax down on that yellow building which is beside the inmates and the visitors areas, where the 78 caper went on, the hostage taking caper. You'll remember that one well, I'm quite sure, and there's Brian and the warden going to tell us a thing or two about it, because that's the last one in the BC pen, I'm quite sure.
We now know they had an attempt to escape by 5 inmates, and charged with them later on were 2 members of the community, 2 ladies, as part of an escape plot when they actually broke what was called unbreakable glass, and they smashed their way through that and then made exit through one of the doors. In order to do that, they were firing a pistol, somehow entered the area and was used to knock a lock off. And the real humorous part of it, when it was all over, 7 days later, we found the gun was not loaded. There was great fears, there was very serious incident, deep cautions taken by all the police force involved, everybody armed, everything done textbook correct. A very serious incident, alarms throughout the system, the crisis posts were manned, and it went on for 7 days, probably one of the longer hostage-taking incidents in the history of the institution. But when it was all over, we could have really, if we'd have known, entered the place after the first 5 minutes and resolved it because the gun wasn't loaded.
Almost a Monty Python finish.
A real dandy.
Warden Rennett, I've got one basic, very important question to ask. Did you bring the cards?
No, I forgot them.
What's this table we're sitting at?
Well, it's a recreational area, and inmates did play cards. It says Romoli, but I think other games have been played.
Played as well. Now,
Yeah.
precisely where are we in this kind of echoey, somewhat ghost-like cell block at the moment?
We're in the B7 cell block in range 1F.
And that was described in your penitentiary terminology as what?
A very secure, maximum security cell block, one of the best in certainly Western Canada.
Every single cell is solitary and apart and unlocked electronically or by hand?
By hand.
By hand.
By hand.
Now, here we are, 1F, did you say?
That's right.
B7.
B7 cell block.
Never, ever will be used again.
Nope, never again.
Give me the timetable. How many prisoners now? How many staff now? When do the prisoners go? When do the staff empty and leave?
Right, we have 70 inmates at the present time. We have a staff now down to 160. We should have the inmates cleared by mid-February, 2 weeks' time. And the staff are being moved to various locations and should be clear by the 31st of March.
So 31st of March, the BC Penitentiary, which has been standing here when it started here since 1895, will be empty.
That is correct.
What happens to it after that? Can you tell me?
Yes, I think so. We have a period from the 31st of March to approximately the 30th of June when we must take all our equipment and our inventory, list it, dispose of it by use to other institutions or other governmental departments, and or sell them through Crown Assets Disposal. The property itself will be turned over to the DPW, Department of Public Works, and they will dispose of the property probably by selling to an interested buyer.
There's no suggestion you've had officially or unofficially anywhere throughout the service that all or part of it will become an historic institution.
No, not at all.
None of that. Seriously, you've been warden now here for how long?
3 years.
Don't mind me calling you warden instead of director,
Not at all. That's the new name.
because a warden is a warden.
That's right.
Escapes. You know the history of this prison. I can't remember that many escapes from the BC pen.
We've had some, of course, recent years. Some that, well, in the main are error, where dummies are left, or some officer is a little bit slow in the uptake. I can recall one where an ingenious young inmate who has a hard hat, normally painted red so that he can be identified, somehow concealed a manner in which he painted it blue. The staff wear blue hard hats. He was able to walk out the back gate, wave to the guard, and the guard waved back, and out he went.
And I'm not trying to be smart, Alec, but do you think this is just about the first time that the BC pen has been drug-free in the last 25 years?
No, I wouldn't say it's the first time, but it's one of the times, that's for sure. And I'm not sure it's drug-free now. We still have 70 inmates.
It's difficult to believe that. The ingenuity of inmates in getting drugs is almost beyond total control.
Yeah, I'd say it's most difficult. Our troubles in the institutions invariably are when they can't get drugs or when they've got too much.
Well, explain that to me.
Well, there are ways in which inmates obtain medication and or drugs, sometimes legally, sometimes illegally, and sometimes the legal route is a case where if we're not careful, they'll save them up. And someone will get a larger dose that he should be prescribed, and therefore you have a problem. They get into a high situation and do not react normally. They get irrational.
You know, you leave me with an impression that maybe if there is a minimum amount of drugs in the prison, it's easier to control.
Yes, yes, I think that's true.
So you face the when you're a warden of a prison like this, you do all you can to stop it, but you face the practical realities of life.
That's correct.
I mustn't interview you as if this were the very end of maximum security jails or penitentiaries of this size, because it isn't. But it intrigues me, all the guys who inhabited these cell blocks. How much money did they make, or do they make?
Oh yeah, they're on a pay scale. We have 5 levels of pay. And in quick terms, it goes from $1 to $2 a day. It's not a great deal of money, but it's what they need for each day's use.
Like for the canteen money?
Right, canteen money.
Cigarettes or savings?
That's correct.
You forgot to tell me about that incredible jamboree you had here called the BC Penitentiary Rock Festival. And when I heard about it, I thought it was a rock festival. What was it?
Well, in 1967, Jack, we had an incident where inmates went into the yard and refused to come out, and they were throwing rocks at the staff. And it became affectionately called the Rock Festival. And there was no music. It was just noise with stones pelting off the posts and stands, and the officers were ducking. And since that day, we put up, of course, protective screening. But I guess if one in describing it thought it was a music festival, they were way off.
It was a rock festival.
It was a stone festival, if you like.
Well, a rock festival, but nobody was stoned, hopefully.
Right.
Well, here we sit now. B7 is empty.
That is right.
You've got 70 inmates still behind bars. Are they specially selected? Are they terribly secure ones, or are they just people who are filling the cells until they go elsewhere?
No, in fact, Jack, about 50% of them are those who have given strong indications that they do not want to leave British Columbia for good reasons in some cases. And we're keeping them here as long as we can.
Yeah, it must be very difficult if a guy's getting near the end of his sentence and you're going to whip him back east somewhere.
It's difficult.
Are you trying to avoid that where
Yes.
the prisoners are involved?
Yes, wherever possible.
And now you said to be 70 prisoners and 160 guards?
That's right.
These 160 guards have all got to be relocated sometime before the end of the march, sometime away from their home base in and around New Westminster.
That's the difficult part. The difficult part is not finding them a job. The Federal Penitentiary Service, Correction Service Canada is called today, have enough positions throughout the country to accommodate everyone. And the problem is they're not in around New Westminster.
So therefore, even if it's a move up the valley, a guy might have to change his house. He might have to sell his house. He might have to leave his friends and go elsewhere to follow his career.
That's right.
Well, what can I ask you, Herr Burnett? You have good knowledge of the penitentiary service, and I'll ask you the obvious question, and you might not give me the obvious answer. Are you sorry to see this place go?
Yes, I am. And more in connection with some of the staff than in my own small 3 years. There's a very emotional thing here with a lot of the staff. They've devoted a lifetime to working here. And I have some feeling of, well, emotion towards their life and devotion.
You know, because by and large, prison officials, prison guards, prison wardens, if you want to call them that, the public doesn't give them much consideration in the kind of job they've had to do over the years, does it?
Well, that's been the general feeling that people have working in the system. I don't know whether it's true, but I know some of our officers have that strong feeling that they're less than the best, but I consider them the best.
How about Herr Burnett?
Well, I've got a decision to make in the near future, whether I'm going to stay in British Columbia or be forced to leave into, as I understand it, I have a choice of 3 provinces, Manitoba, Ontario, or New Brunswick.
Have you made your choice?
No, I haven't.
I'll pray for you.
Thank you, Jack.
Look, thanks for the tour around the place. It has a ghostly feeling to it. Do you feel that?
Well, all prisons have a bit, I think, particularly when they're old.
And empty.
And empty now.
But you don't want to see them back in here. This is finished, gone, forever.
That's the policy.
And that's the plan.
That's the plan.
Thank you very much, Heb. R-E-Y-N-E-T-T, pronounced Rennet. I'm out of the pen again, free and clear. It was a strange experience. However, let's talk about the BC pen a little bit after the break. Just as a matter of gossip, it was quite ironic to hear Herb Rennet, the warden, tell Brian, after they'd gone through the 78 caper, and by the way, these 2 women who were charged were acquitted. That was where there were hostages held in the visitors area. It's quite ironic to hear Herb say that when it was all over, they discovered the gun, which had kept them outside for these 7 or more days, was in fact then empty. They had no more rounds for the pistol. You know, when you look around that place, you begin to wonder. You know, people of New Westminster, especially mayors and elected officials in New Westminster, and those not employed at the BC Penitentiary, have wanted to get rid of that place for as long as I can remember. It's one of the most valuable pieces of land on the Lower Mainland. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But the full future hasn't yet been decided. I suppose it'll depend on what kind of propositions are made to sell the place or take over the place. I wouldn't think it would become any kind of a government institution again. I think it might be not a bad idea to keep the front little turreted castle bit in some way with the gardens. You know, for many years those gardens were verboten. It was out of bounds under federal law even to stop and sniff the flowers there. Although during the warden was telling me, remember when we had all these activist groups standing more or less outside the gate with their bullhorns and all their capers? They got special permission to do that. But the law is that you can't go anywhere on BC penitentiary grounds without permission. And I think the the old sentence put down in the criminal code 100 years ago, was probably about 2 years in the bucket. No, I'm not going to make any other remarks about the BC Pen myself unless something comes to mind. Just as a matter of social note, the 3 prisoners who were involved with me, or rather with whom I was involved, were real tough, bad apples. But I followed the history of each of the 3 of them. They all got additional sentences, I think as much as 6 years after the riot. All 3 of them are out, clean, free, and, believe it or believe it not, I think rehabilitated. So it can be done. And they were boys who were really quite, you might say, unrefined at the time. Go ahead, please.
I was just wondering if, during your talks with them, if you'd found out that if there's going to be any tours of the place after all the inmates are out?
I doubt it very much. I know some criminology classes and people like that want to go around, and I'm sure everybody else in the world wants to go around. I don't see much sense in that. I think for educational purposes, perhaps criminology people or maybe some school students, but you'd have to go to the regional director of Canada Corrections, I think they call it now.
Yeah.
I personally recommend against it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. It's like I've lived here all my life, and I've seen the outside of it, and I've heard all the problems, but it'd just be kind of interesting to see what it looks like inside.
There's some talk about using it for a movie set. I didn't get that from Herb Rennett. I just seemed to pick it up in my mind in the past few days.
Yeah.
Certainly be a good place to make a movie if you wanted to make a movie about a prison riot, but who needs movies about prison riots? We had them in real life covered on television. Eh? Anyway, you can find out from the regional director's office, and they'll bless me for even semi-suggesting it. I don't recommend it.
I already talked to some of them, and they don't know very much about it, but...
Well, you know, it's a matter for the bureaucracy. Go ahead, please.
Jack, how are you?
Fine.
I shared your night in 63. I'm sure you'll recognize the voice if you think about it a minute.
Were you one of them or one of me?
It was one of them and you.
Were you down there?
Of course I was. You know me well.
There were 15 of us down there.
Well, you think of the one that you perhaps know best.
It can't be you.
Yes, it's me. I just happened to be watching this morning. I relived a little history with you this morning, Jack.
Well, isn't that funny?
You still can't place me.
Yes, I can place you. I can't speak to you off the air. Could I give the first initial of your diminutive name?
Yes.
R.
You're absolutely right.
And your second initial was?
Let's go to the last initial of the second name. S.
S. S.
There, we got it.
Yes, I got it, and I'll never forget that night.
Now, didn't we have some kind of a remembrance?
Matter of fact, I got kind of annoyed at you at one stage that night, remember?
Yes, and perhaps you did, but I think maybe with reflection you wouldn't be annoyed anymore.
No. That was a rather tense moment, was it not, however?
For both of us.
At that time. And how are you doing since then?
I think I'm doing reasonably well. You haven't heard of me?
No, then that's good. You were
I've heard of you, and I think that's good, too.
You were serving a fairly substantial sentence, and we won't even talk or whisper or mention what that was about, but you were out within, what, 2 years, 3 years?
2.5 years, Jack.
2.5 years, re-established in Vancouver?
Yes.
I tell you what, give me a call. Leave your number, will you, with Linda?
Fine. I'll be happy to.
And we'll have a cup of coffee downtown.
I would hope so. Just one reflection on that. Isn't it remarkable after all these years, which does now date it at 17 years or almost that, you know, pain has no memory. That's perhaps why the whole system fails.
I suppose so. Do you remember, though, when we had the guy, the madman or the pseudo-madman brought in chains?
I was there right till 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, right there in the Gems area.
And I got hold of Bonner and I said, you got to bring this guy from solitary confinement at the Riverview where he had inflicted 365 superficial wounds in his body, and these 3 convicts are telling me he's been killed by the establishment, and we brought him in chains to the window to prove he was alive. That was a night.
It was a night to remember.
A night to forget.
Well, amazingly enough, it has tremendous recollection, but when you come through it, I suppose you're stronger and wiser for it, aren't you? And, of course, it is an experience that one won't soon forget. And having watched you on the air, I just happened to be watching this morning, and I just about fell over when we lived a little history together.
All it goes to prove, R, is that everybody watches Webster on prime time between 9 and 10:30 in the morning.
Nice speaking to you, Jack. And
Thanks a million. Leave the number, will you?
would you put me back?
I'll put you back on hold. Leave the number and I'll give you a call. My goodness gracious me. I'll take a break. Now. One day I'll write a book. There's another story from that night that fellow brought back to me. When I left the house that night, my daughter Linda said, make sure you're not taken hostage. Fair enough. I was going up and down in the BC pen from the warden's office where I was broadcasting from, down through the drug addicts and into the underground gymnasium. And after one or two of these trips, I said to one of the guards, phone my wife and tell her I'm all right. See? Margaret later told me that she got a phone call which said, this is the BC pen speaking, your husband's all right. Slammed down the phone. About 4 o'clock in the morning, and Margaret is, not quite sure what's happening, there's a phone call from my stupid brother in Scotland, Sandy, who's the jazzy editor of a Sunday paper, the Sunday Mail in Glasgow. On the phone to Margaret. Hello, Margaret. I hear Jack's being held hostage in the BC pen. Because the hostage story was on the wire, but I'd kept the hostage story off the air because that time I was down below and couldn't broadcast anymore. See? So Margaret, of course, always blessed my dear brother Sandy for giving her heart failure at 4 o'clock in the morning. 3. Go ahead, please.
I have the dubious record, Jack, of being the youngest inmate ever in the penitentiary. I was 15 when I was in there.
What year would that be?
1950, October the 3rd. And
50.
I was sentenced by good old Oscar Orr to 2 years for theft of an auto because I lied about my age. I didn't want to go to a juvenile institution, so I lied and said I was older. So they changed the charge from taking a car without the owner's consent to theft of an automobile, and I was sentenced to 2 years less 1 day in Ocala, which I appealed and received 2 years in the penitentiary because it meant I had to do less time. There's more time off for good behavior, and it wasn't quite as crazy a place as that was.
No, it wasn't. As a matter of fact, I've had many a guy plead in court to be given penitentiary time so he could go to the pen instead of going to Ocala.
Right, and the penitentiary and the inmates also, because although I was the youngest, and they found out later in the penitentiary. As a matter of fact, the school teacher was the one who hauled me down one day, and when he assessed my school records, because I wanted to continue my education, I was hauled in front of Warden Douglas at the time, who is now since dead.
Oh, that's Douglas.
I was a Y number. They had a Y, then they had the 68, and then
How did you do?
I beg your pardon?
How did you do?
I did very well, amazingly enough. I made a lot of good friends in there. But Ys were segregated, and we lived in B7, along with a lot of lifers. And what they did was, in those days, you had quiet time. The bell went at 7. It was the silent system, and you got ticketed or what do they call it now? I can't quite remember. If you whistled or if you coughed or made a lot of noise. And so at 7 o'clock, you could really get into studying. And then you could, upgrade your education and so on. As far as learning a trade, that was the big thing at the day. They all sent you there to learn the trade, and there was just no way you could learn the trade. It was a joke. The equipment was...
Anyway, you never went back.
I never went back. I got a Christmas parole approximately 2 years later, and I got out in November, and I never went back, but I'm in the public service now, and I had to apply for a pardon, and Mr. Clark was the one who gave it to me. Mr. Trudeau refused, but Mr. Clark was kind enough to give me a pardon because he seemed to feel that since 1950 to 1980 I hadn't been arrested, and I think he thought that I was...
You were more than entitled, and thanks for your call. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
Have you heard about inmates in the BC pen where at least a dozen are going to be sent to Kent against their will?
I saw a story in the paper about it the other day, and I know the problem they're faced with. That's why Rennet is keeping people as long as he can at the BC Penitentiary.
Right.
But I'm sure that I got the assurances, I'm sure you have too, that those in protective custody will still be at their own request, will still be in protective custody.
Not really. Out at Kent, there is no protective custody there.
Oh, yes, there is.
And the food will be served to them by the population, and it would be tampered with. from soap in the mashed potatoes to whatever you could imagine.
You're worried about someone whom you know there.
I have a relative in the penitentiary.
Have you been to the regional director about it?
No, I haven't. I've been to the media, and we're doing what we can through the media.
Well, I'll be going out to Kent one of these days to have a look at it, and I'll take up that particular point when I go out there.
Right. Jack, also, if you were in the BC penitentiary, would you want to be in general population or protective custody?
Protective custody.
Would you then be willing to be labeled a sex offender or an informant?
No, that is wrong, of course. This is one of the troubles, because I made that point very clear with Herb this morning, that you can ask for it, you won't always get it,
Right.
but if the circumstances are such and they've got a cell, they'll put you in protective custody. But not everybody in protective custody is a child molester, a sex offender, or a dangerous criminal of any kind.
Exactly, but I wish the media would get that straight.
Yeah, well, they don't, but
Label them all sex offenders.
not to worry. And if I go out to Kent to have a look around, I'll make a point of chasing up that angle of it.
Really, I hope so.
Much obliged.
Thank you.
Bye. Take a break. Normally, I leave these kind of things to dear old Brian. He's younger. It's his turn now, after the break. Ten more minutes in the BC pen, and then I've got a couple of guests here with whom I must deal with a story about the post office. And it's always topical, the dear old beloved post office. Where am I? 4. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
I believe it's Colonel, isn't it?
Going back a long way, yes. I was only a half colonel at the time, but you may call me Colonel.
I met you 35 years ago.
Oh, good. Where?
Becky Hall Street.
In Sucky Hall Street. Well, you weren't on the BC pen. You were just a Sucky Hall Street rounder.
Well, I just thought I'd bring back a memory to you.
Well, I can't remember the name.
No,
Eh?
I don't think so.
Any more?
Well, I think about this election, you know.
No, I'll tell you what, leave your number and I'll give you a call. That's a promise.
No.
Oh.
I think about this election, you know.
Uh-huh. Yeah, go on.
I would say that they're just a bunch of children playing in the garden.
Moved, seconded, and carried unanimously.
I say they're just a bunch of children playing in the garden.
I heard you. How could I miss it, especially from somebody like yourself? Leave your number. This is from Victoria. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning.
I would say that institution that you've been showing compared to the one in Saskatchewan is just about like a motel.
You've served time in Saskatchewan, have you?
Yes, I was involved in a car accident in which I was held responsible, and I received 1 month in the institution in Regina.
That was a provincial institution you were in.
That's correct. And in this institution, instead of having nice foam rubber as they have to sleep on there, they handed us an empty pillowcase, or a big long pillowcase, and showed us a stack of straw, and we made our own pillow.
Well, let me tell you, I slept in one of those for years, and that's called a palliasse.
But I just started to say, a palliasse.
And that was the standard British Army issue mattress for many a long, grubby, buggy year. So anyway, no, a month, you did that standing on your head or sleeping on your palliasse, didn't you?
I didn't spend too much time in it. It wasn't as quiet as one of your last callers said.
No, I know that. Anyway, thanks for your call. Sydney.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to talk about the...
Sydney, by the way, for any non-BC people watching, is not this man's name, it's the name of a place.
Right.
Right.
Anyway, the prison that I toured down off the coast of San Francisco, I think the BC pen could be used for very educational purposes, and that is open up part of it for tours or for guided school kids and that sort of thing, because I know I was very impressed with the... it comes down on you real heavy, and anybody that's thinking about that this is a good place to be for a while, get their ideas changed considerably just by walking through the place.
Maybe, but you could not call the BC pen the Alcatraz of the North.
Well, maybe you couldn't, but anything like that, is fairly impressive. After seeing that show, Scared Straight, I think that even a few tours of that with school kids would do a lot of educating.
Well, if and when they ever catch me, I'm going to do my time at William Head and practice my golf.
Well, that may be a good idea, too. I think, though, that maybe the educational people could look at it in some way or open...
Maybe, but talking about golf, it took me a long while to accept because of my background. The fact that golf courses in the places like William Head for minimum security prisoners are not a bad thing, are well worth the money and are a good thing. You've got to give guys a feeling of being at least civilized so that when they come out, they're still civilized.
Well, that may be good.
I'll go along with that much in the way of rehabilitation, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Oh, just a minute. Just a minute. There will... Is this official? The regional office called me and said that there will be tours and an open house of the BC Penitentiary around this early part of May. And the number to call... Oh, no, I give the number. Give the number? 666-6211. It's not meant for reunions, really.
No.
But I've no doubt there'll be a certain element, you know, taking your grandchildren around to show you the place where the old man got his grade 10 education.
I think a lot of parents, though, should consider, with the open houses, taking their kids through and just show them what kind of life they could look forward to if they decided on that sort of a situation.
Yeah, I know, it's, you know, it's kind of like the old joke that you get a tall, skinny, 9-foot woman to come into the house, stripped to a bathing suit, and you have trouble feeding your children, and you stand there, and you say to your children, "That's how you're going to look if you don't drink your milk."
Well,
and you can do the same kind of thing with a penitentiary, I suppose.
well, I know it impressed me considerably, and I was on a tour with one of the.
Fair enough tour. I want to see if I can find any more old friends. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster,
Yes, ma'am.
could you tell me what's happened to Dragon Cernetic? Is he still alive?
Dragon Cernetic is an official, I think, in the East.
Oh, I hadn't heard anything.
He's still in the service, of that I'm well aware. He was at one time the warden of the BC Penitentiary.
Right.
Dragon Cernetic. Wonderful name.
Yes.
Don't ask me to spell it. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Webster. My name is Don, and I'm an ex-resident of the BC Pen. I was in the BC Pen during the 1976 riot, and I'm very well aware of some of the situations that went down. I also wish to announce that the riot was sparked by the staff.
I am not here to hold an inquest on what happened in the past. I covered one of the riots simply with a sad reference to it. I gave you a light-hearted piece about no bullet in the gun in the other one. I told the story of my own riot. I am not holding an inquest. If there are any new riots, then we'll hold other inquiries. Ah, damned if I am. I run the program. Go ahead, please.
Oh, Jack.
Yeah.
Hi. I'd just like to know about the situation here with the shutdown. If it's going to affect the Matsqui prisoners out there.
No, why should it? Some of them may well go to Matsqui, obviously, but some of them may not go to Matsqui. It's not going to affect Matsqui. Matsqui's there, and Matsqui will stay there.
But are they going to add on to Matsqui to accommodate, say, some of these 70 prisoners that they have in the...
No, they've already built Kent. No, I don't think they have any plans to expand Matsqui. Don't know. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Webster. I'm very sorry that your program so far hasn't shown any of the positive aspects of keeping the BC Pen, especially for the taxpayer, because I'm quite familiar with the penitentiary.
Ma'am, the place, the decisions have been made.
Yes, I know, but lots of things can be changed, because what in the world are you going to do with the future protective custody inmate? And we're going to get more and more of those as time goes by.
Ma'am, we've had too many inmates in too high security for too long. That much I'll grant. Whether or not it was the right decision to get rid of B7 and all of the BC Pen is something else again. I'm telling you what's happening on the record in front of us now. Decisions made, no change.
Well, I think it's a very foolish decision.
You can say that. I mean, you can say that. It's a foolish decision. But I mean, you and I both know, each of us knows, that New Westminster for 1,000 years has been saying, get rid of the BC pen.
But, Mr. Webster, look at the trouble they have at Kent. They can't get enough staff to run the place.
Ma'am, that's their problem, not ours. I'm showing you the end of the BC pen. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
I've been trying to contact you now for about 6 months about M2. Wrote you a letter, talked several times to Brian, and I want to know what you think about M2.
M2.
That's their rehabilitate prisoners that go in there and they stay with them. It's supposed to be a period of 2 years, whatever it takes, and when they come out, they meet them at the gate. They will if there's...
Oh, you're talking about this outside organization called M2.
That's right.
Don't know anything about it, sir. I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Will you try to learn? I've been at you 6 months.
Well, because you're at me doesn't mean I've got to do it, does it?
Well, no.
I've got to do a program every day, 90 minutes live. We have to do many things. Sometimes it's going to take 6 months to do it. We don't get it done.
This thing that I'm trying to talk about is to look after these guys when they're coming out of prison, and I think you should give them an airing.
Call Brian again. Brian's decision.
Oh, Jack?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, this is Adam calling.
Yes, Adam.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you a little story. It's got to do with jail.
Do with the BC pen.
Well, it's just it's got to do with jail. I got pulled over one night and I'd used your name.
Yeah.
I'd been drinking and they threw me in jail. I got a good beating.
That's because you used my name, you fool.
I was just joking around. You see, they pulled me over. I just got out of the bar. I guess I was staggering a bit. They pulled me over downtown.
If you'd used somebody else's name, who knows what might have happened.
It was more or less I was using it as a joke. They said,
Go on, tell me this. I want to hear this. You said, this is a joke, is it?
well, yeah, in a way. They said, what's your name? And I
Where
said,
did it happen?
Jack, what? I said, Webster, your time's up.
What a pity to finish a good program on a stupid call like that. BC Penitentiary, gave you the facts. 70 inmates, 160 guards. Closes at the end of March. Open to the public on somewhere around the 1st of May. If you want to know any more about it, phone 666-6211. Don't phone me. Back after the break. With me now is Mr. Oscar Johansson from Ashcroft, British Columbia. You know the signpost on the highway there. He's director of the BC and Yukon branch of the Canadian Postmasters and Postmasters Assistants Association, right?
That's right, Jack.
And you got problems.
Well, we have some problems.
Well, first of all, tell me who you are. You are postmasters and assistant postmasters, and you have an association.
That's right. It's called an association, but basically we're a union.
Are you certified as a union?
We're certified as a union.
Well, why have you never been out on strike?
Because we have never gone on a strike. We're in the small towns all over Canada. We have approximately 8,000 members across Canada, and we serve in about 5,400 post offices. Because we are so scattered and small, we have never been on strike, Jack.
Now, are you actually employees of the Canadian Postal Department, or are you entrepreneurs who run post offices?
Our contract is with the Treasury Board of Canada.
So you're contracted employees?
No, we're paid salaried employees.
Paid salaried employees of the post office?
That's right.
And in British Columbia, what do you have? You'll have how many?
We have approximately 623 members in BC and the Yukon. And this is in about 426 offices, according to the post office records as of March 31st of last year.
In other words, you've got these hundreds of offices, and you're fearful that the post office is going to cut back service.
Well, this is the information we have, that they are planning in the future to cut out Saturday services in the small communities. Now, they have done so in the larger centers already about a year ago. And but in larger centers, you have post offices in shopping centers and drugstores where you can buy stamps, mail parcels, mail registered letters. But if you cut it off in a small community, there is no such service then.
So therefore, if they carry out what you fear is their plan to close these small, can I call them rural?
Well, they're what we call semi-staff offices or group offices.
These group offices in all these small towns, that means you're going to be totally without any kind of service for 3 days a week.
Well,
Right?
yes.
No.
Be
2 days a week.
2 days a week, but then your mail service could be curtailed. If they cut out the highway services, you could have mail sitting there then for possibly for 3 days without being moving. In the bigger cities, you have mail drops on the corners. You can still mail letters all week, 7 days a week. The mail is picked up from these boxes and moves. In smaller centers, this doesn't happen.
That's a very good point. I can mail a letter any time, and it'll be
That's
picked
right.
up within the next 24 hours,
That's
hopefully,
right.
won't it?
That's right.
If they close your offices, and if it's put in after closing on a Friday night, it won't move until
Till Sunday night.
Sunday night?
Or Monday
Or
morning.
Monday morning.
Depending on what time the mail is picked up and dispatched.
You obviously supply other services too. You'll be the only source of a number of services in these 400-odd communities in BC and the Yukon on Saturdays.
That's right. In a lot of cases, every day of the week. In a lot of cases, we're the only government agent in the federal government agency there. We supply family allowance forms, old age pension forms, income tax forms, passport forms, unemployment insurance forms, excise, customs, gas rebate forms, migratory bird hunting license, besides supply the mail. And we're the only federal contract we have. As the Postmaster General said in a convention I attended in Quebec City, we are ambassadors of the federal government in these small communities.
And you reckon if they cut out Saturday opening,
Pardon?
They're going to cut out Saturday opening?
That's what they're talking about, that's right.
You want to stop them?
Well, we're trying to stop them because it's going to affect our membership as well. Some of our employees will probably lose some hours. And also, we're not concerned about that as much as we are concerned about our customers. We live in small communities, I'd say, of 2,000 people or less.
Now, your post office is a post office only, is
That's
that
right? A post office only.
It's not anything else, just a straight post office.
Some of them are in stores or what have you. Group offices are in stores. There are approximately 129 of us who are post offices only, probably more than that. But there are some that are in group offices which would be in the corner of a small grocery store or such.
Now, what about your money? Do you negotiate money with the Treasury Board, you people?
Our national office negotiates a contract. Our contract now presently expires on July the 6th, 1980.
All right, if supposing I'm running a post office and I've got 2 or 3 employees, do I negotiate for all of us?
No, you don't negotiate. Our national office has a negotiating team.
So you're salaried employees?
We're all salaried employees.
And you've got part-timers as well?
That's right. Some are paid by the hour. Full-timers are all paid on an annual salary basis. They vary anywhere from an assistant in an office. They vary from $10,563 a year up to my salary, which would be $18,541. I have 6 employees in my office.
Here's an interesting thing. You say that among the groups who will be hurt by a Saturday closing will be doctors and smaller hospitals, which depend on the post office to send samples and specimens to laboratories for testing and reports. Some of these specimens are only good for a given period of time, and an extra day's delay could mean that they might be worthless.
That's right. This happens occasionally now from smaller centers. If it gets delayed along the line, they aren't of any use for testing by the time they get there, so it's very important that they get there very quickly.
I think I'll open the phones. I've got time to open the phones for people on any number from small towns as to whether or not they would mind or whether or not they will scream their head off if their post office is closed on Saturdays. Is that the question?
That's right.
So let's take it from towns which are affected, not the major metropolitan centres of BC. After the break. Oscar Johansson is from Ashcroft, and he's the director for BC and the Yukon, for a body I'd never heard of before, the Canadian Postmasters and Assistants Association. And he's fearful that the federal government, in its restraint policies, is going to cut the service by 1/6 by opening your places only 5 days a week instead of 6. Realizing, of course, that we've only had 5-day service down here, but we have options that you don't have.
That's true, Jack.
In these small towns. Why don't you get your members to nag every MP on every platform or every radio show in your area?
Well, this is what we're trying to do, Jack, is we're trying to get these things set up so that we're asking people to go to the all candidates meetings and ask all candidates from all parties what their stand is on this. We're not against the restraint program, but we would like to see not all of it taken out on our group.
Oh, not all on your back.
That's right.
You're not quibbling about the money you get paid.
Well, that's another story.
Okay, we'll leave that. Here's a call from Ucluelet on the west coast of the island. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, friendly Ucluelet here, Jack. I agree with your guest there. I think the post office should stay open on a Saturday. A lot of people are fishing and logging, and Saturday's the only day they get a chance to go to the post office.
In other words, if you're out all week and you come in on Saturday and your post office is closed, you're dead.
That's right. You want to do your mail your checks off to whoever and do all the stuff you do in the post office. Our post office is busier Saturday morning than any other day of the week.
Maybe they might just say they'd close it on Monday then.
I guess Monday would be a good day to close if they were going to close the day, but it definitely shouldn't be a Saturday.
Well, Mr. Johansson doesn't like my attitude. What do you say to that?
Well, we don't want to close any day. We're only open on half-a-day Saturdays now. We used to be open full 6 days. They closed us down about 7 or 8 years ago to half a day on Saturday, and now they're talking about 5 days.
Yeah. And you want to keep the 5.5 days?
Well, a lot of places, they don't even have banks in a lot of small communities, so everything has to be done by mail. Banking, everything has to be done by mail.
Anyway, you've made a good point about Saturdays for sure. How are things? You're a fisherman.
That's correct, yeah.
How's the weather in Ucluelet this morning?
It's blowing like hell, and there's snow between here and Port Alberni.
Last time I was up there, I was on the coffin ship for 14 men. Do you remember that one?
No.
The Tassus Prince.
Oh, I see. Well,
Remember?
we've had different ships come in here.
Oh, the Tassus Prince. That was a great ship.
The Northland.
That was an old
navigation, I
Northland
think.
one, yeah.
Yeah, I've been here 14 years, so.
Okie dokie. Bye.
Jack, bye now.
I'm getting so old nobody else remembers anything. This is from?
From Agassiz, sir.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning.
Listening to this gentleman, I quite agree that the Postal Service should not be closed for any 2-day period in rural areas. As it is, we already pay a rate for post box services.
Mm-hmm.
Urban areas do not pay any extra levy.
Oh, you've got to buy your box, have you?
Yes, you do. You have to rent your box by the year.
Yeah, if I live down here, of course, my mail comes to me at my door at no extra charge. You've got to pay for your wee box.
That's right. So, as far as I'm concerned, with the number of people, that the Postal Services do service in rural areas, to discontinue use also of mail service for 1 day, plus, paying this $5 a year, well, that's what the rate is here in Agassiz.
Do you pay a license to get your mail delivered to you in a box at the post office?
That's right. So, in effect, we are being penalized in both ways.
If I want a big box, do I have to pay more than $5?
That's right. There are 5, 10, 15, and 25 different sizes.
I didn't know that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Now, who's your MP? Do you know?
Yeah, our MP is Mr. Patterson.
Well, he might not be after the 18th. You better nag all of them, eh?
I think we should start now, because as it is, we have one delivery per day plus 1 pickup.
Mm-hmm.
In the city, I'm sure there's more than 1 pickup per day.
Go down Georgia Street and you'll see lots of pickups at night. That's a joke. I'm getting funny looks from Linda about my joke about the tall, thin woman and about that one, too. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Yes.
To speak about the emotional element that your guest brought into this, the fact that patients...
Oh, specimens.
Yes, might be at a disadvantage. I can hardly believe that in an emergency, a small town would not get together and get these things going. As a matter of fact, I know that's false, because this summer I was in Banff. I happened to come home and got back to Banff at 2 o'clock in the morning. But it was after 2. There were no taxis available.
No taxis available. Was this to do with a hospital specimen?
No, but I had to walk home in the dark at 2 o'clock in the morning, over a mile.
Okay, ma'am, I'm glad somebody gave you a lift. At least I hope they did. That's not the point at all you were making, is it?
No.
The point you were making is that a specimen could lie there an extra day over the weekend.
That's right. That's true if they cut the mail service.
Okay, so you want all your supporters in all your towns to lobby their MPs and
Lobby their MPs, their chambers of commerce, get the support going. We haven't yet had it actually in writing that they're going to do this. They're working on a plan.
that you're not sleeping in Ashcroft these days. You want to get at them before they announce it.
That's true.
You're confident this is their plan.
This is not only the plan in British Columbia. This is a national-wide problem.
Nationwide.
Nationwide.
Good. Next time I'm on the highway and I see the sign to Ashcroft, I'll come in and see if you're open.
You just do that anytime, Jack. You're most welcome.
My thanks to Oscar Johansson, BC Director for the BC and the Yukon of the Canadian Postmasters and Assistants Association. He has a point. After the break. I could tell by the look on your face you didn't like my jokes this morning.
No comment.
No comment, and that's not for publication. Tomorrow.
Tomorrow we have the Minister of Transport, the Honorable Dawn Mazinkowski, and also we have Marie Peacock, who is the Warden of the Women's Unit at Ocala.
That should be an interesting morning,
Yes.
to say the least. And this morning went very well indeed. No complaints about that program at all this morning. I couldn't understand that woman on that last call or whatsoever.
She didn't get to the point, I think.
Sometimes it's difficult, but by and large the calls were good this morning. It was very nice to hear from my old friend of the night of April 19th, 1963. Webster tomorrow, 9 a.m. precisely.